How many minutes did you spend on your looks yesterday? Just answer from your gut. Don't overthink it. Guesstimate. 20 minutes? That sounds about right? Let's think about it for a second. Did you shower in the morning? How long did that take from getting in there to drying off? Did you shave? Shave your legs, your face, maybe? Did you line up your beard? Use any moisturizer or body lotions? Do any skincare? Pluck any of the hairs in your nose or between your eyebrows? Cut your fingernails? How long did it take you just to pick an outfit yesterday and get dressed? Did you style your hair? Put on makeup? Beard oil? Did you hit the gym? How long was your workout? Did you shower after? Restyle your hair? Redo your makeup? Did you count calories yesterday or spend any time thinking about your diet at all? Did you watch any makeup tutorials or gym bro videos? Now, not just going off our gut, but thinking a little more carefully, counting up absolutely everything, how much time do you reckon you spent on looking good? Some of you will have probably had a beauty appointment yesterday. Haircut, lashes, nails, tattoo, cosmetic procedures. Maybe one of you had cosmetic surgery. That's possible. Maybe the answer for some of you is almost all day. And maybe for others, the answer actually is about 20 minutes, even after more careful reflection. That is a possible answer. But my point here with this exercise is it's going to be a lot more than 20 minutes for most of you. And this may seem like a post-industrial preoccupation to spend so much time on one's looks, but if you look at extant, traditional human cultures, you see elaborate beautification everywhere. Look at the hair of Himbo women, which they turn to red braids with butterfat and ochre. Or look at the knife-sharpened teeth of Aka foragers. Or look at what we might call the makeup worn by men of the nomadic Wodabe, who stand side by side for judgment in, what we might call beauty competitions. The West doesn't have anything perfectly analogous to that cultural phenomenon. These are small-scale societies, but these are not small-scale beauty efforts. And it may seem like a human preoccupation, but tell that to your nearby cat who is listening without understanding me, and who will spend as much as half of their day today grooming. Or tell that to the bearded vulture, who dyes themselves orange and red using ochre. Or the birds of paradise that clean their environment to produce a more flattering backdrop for their mating displays. Technological and symbolic culture seem to come together with us and make us better at this game, but we're hardly the only animal that attends to their own appearance. Look at my screen time metrics on my phone. Always horrifies me. 2 hours a day seems like far too much time to be spent on a phone, and yet my score is literally never that low. I always feel like it couldn't possibly be the best use of my time on Earth to spend as much time as I do on my phone. And I'm so glad there's no ledger on which my beauty time is recorded, as I'm sure I'd feel similarly about that time if there were. Today, I'll be speaking to a researcher who, along with her many colleagues, checked in on the beauty time of over 90,000 people from 93 countries. As far as I'm aware, this is the largest investigation into this topic ever. And in this discussion, we talk about the surprisingly immense benefits of beauty and beautification from an evolutionary perspective, and her, in some cases, quite surprising predictions and findings regarding variation in beautification. Marta Kowal is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Wrocław. She is an evolutionary psychologist with a cross-cultural perspective, primarily focused on love, attraction, and appearance enhancement. And the last of these topics is our focus today. She received a substantial grant from Poland's National Science Center, and she takes a leadership position in an extensive international consortium of over 400 scientists from more than 100 countries. One result of this collaboration and this grant is the 93-country study on beautification I mentioned, which found that, on average, across the diverse and varied sample, people spend 231 minutes per day on their looks. So, If you calculated a disquietingly high beauty time during the introduction, you're in good company. And that's where we start today's conversation. Enjoy. Interesting. Okay, so I can kind of hear the audience, going over their day mentally and trying to figure out where they spend their time, that sort of thing. And they might even assume, given that this is so many minutes, right, that to spend a few hours a day on any activity is quite a lot. How accurate do you think these estimates are?
I was surprised to first find those estimates. I was so shocked that I even looked closely to the data, because my first intuition was maybe we had some errors in capturing the values, maybe there were some errors in coding those variables. So after double and triple checking that there are no clear errors on the side of the data or the survey or how it was captured, I looked more closely to the data. And for instance, I noticed that in Ghana, in general, there were so many people that spent 5 or even 6 hours a day enhancing their physical attractiveness. And these numbers were so high that I even contacted our collaborators from Ghana and asked them, look, hey guys, is it really a thing? Do people from your country really spend so many hours on enhancing your physical attractiveness? And they said, yeah, kind of. We're not surprised to see that. In our country, people spend a lot of time on body hygiene, on cosmetics, on adjusting their hair. So yeah, these numbers aren't that off, and that does not sound that off that we would expect. So I think that after thinking through what we did, these numbers kind of make sense, because what we did in our survey is we asked our participants if they engage in various kinds of physical attractiveness enhancing behaviors. So you would say that first, when you think about beautifying yourself, you can probably imagine a woman applying a makeup, and how could the women spend 3 or even 4 hours a day on applying that makeup, right? But what we did is we asked various questions about how much time do you spend on applying makeup? How much time do you spend on your body hygiene, including washing your body, brushing or flossing your teeth? How much time do you spend on cosmetics? And we asked our participants to think of all the cosmetics they applied. For instance, body lotions, hand creams, face creams, etc. We also asked participants how much time they spend on exercising. And that included doing aerobics, working out at the gym or working out at your home, weightlifting, building your muscles, anything you do, including exercising, that enhance your attractiveness. We also asked them how much time they spend on hair grooming, taking care of their hair, including brushing, washing, styling, styling, anything that they did for hair, even removing hair from face, from bodies. We also asked them how much time they spend on dressing nicely and caring for dresses. That is, choosing what to wear, or maybe changing a couple of days, a couple of times a day. Or how much time they spend on caring for their diet, how much time they spend on choosing what to eat, calculate what kind of fat percentage or proteins they want to intake, preparing the meals, all of that activities. And we also asked them if there's anything else that we did not ask yet that they did for enhancing their attractiveness, so they could also add their own things and types of activities. And for each of those activities, people used a slider to indicate how much time they spent on a typical day on a given activity. And that slider had an interval of 1 minute. So they could choose from 1 minute to up to even 6 hours how much time they spend on a given activity. So in conclusion, if you think about everything that people do to enhance their attractiveness, if you count all the time on all of those activities I mentioned, then those numbers aren't that high, all things considered.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you said this, because I think that this is the crucial point, is that we do more things for our looks than we ourselves might realize. I mean, when I first read this study, I thought, that sounds like a lot. And my first thought was, well, there's lots of cultural variation. Maybe I, as maybe in a Western industrialized society, maybe I spend less time. That was kind of my first impulse. But then I actually thought of it. I mean, if I take today, right, I shaved my face. That probably took 5 to 10 minutes. Styled my hair. That probably took 5 minutes. 15 minutes in the shower. Maybe an hour and a half in the gym, right? Picking an outfit. All of these things added together, checking that I've hit my protein goals or whatever. All this stuff added up, it ends up being a lot more than you would expect in practice. And I think I would encourage listeners to do their own tally. There were, some people in your sample who spent very little time on beauty. So I'm not saying, everybody listening spends a lot of time. I think the elephant in the room type of question, and I think that this will be elucidated as the conversation goes on, but in general terms, why do people devote so much time to this activity, to trying to look good?
I think it's a matter of question connected to benefits of being beautiful and being physically attractive. Because there are so many studies that provided evidence that more attractive individuals are often treated more positively. And there were plenty of meta-analysis that show this effect. People who are more beautiful are preferred as potential partners, and not only romantic partners, but also friends. They are seen as more competent. They're more likely to be hired for jobs. They tend to earn higher tips as servers, especially women. They earn higher salaries, both at the early stage of their career and also considering a lifetime perspective, which is just mind-blowing. Also, beautiful people are more popular as athletes or politicians. They receive a higher endorsement in various life situations at school. And also, more beautiful people report higher psychological well-being and lower levels of stress and depression. There were incredible results from, for instance, Wisconsin longitudinal study that showed this. So the most straightforward answer is that attractiveness carries so many benefits. So the question should be rather, why not all people want to do everything in their power to become attractive? And
yes.
I came from an evolutionary background, so I'd seek an answer within this domain. Some people might say that we learn that more beautiful people receive all of those benefits. But in fact, there are incredible studies that show that children as young as 2 months or even newborns after 18 or even 14 hours after being on the other side of their mother's belly show preferences for more attractive faces. So those small infants, those small babies look longer at attractive faces compared to unattractive faces or less attractive faces. Of course, those judgments were made by adults, but they look more time on those physically attractiveness faces than those less physical attractiveness faces. So there must be something innate in our preferences and our mechanism to pay attention to more attractive people. And this is just amazing, because with some confidence we can say that those small babies did not learn that other people treat others who are more attractive better, or they didn't socialize to do it. They just do it from the day they were born. So I would look and answer in evolutionary forces that shape our preferences for physical attractiveness. And individuals, I would say that individuals with some particular characteristics are more likely to survive or pass on their genes to the next generations. And also they're more likely to successfully reproduce if they are physically attractive. And this is called sexual selection. First laid this hypothesis Darwin, and I believe that many of the listeners are familiar with his work. So overly simplifying, there are some innate mechanisms that are responsible that we care or we pay more attention to more physically attractive people, because those people might, in general, be better suited as our mates as compared to less attractive people. So there's this Q-based approach popularized by Lewis and Bass that says that we humans have an innate predisposition to look at those traits, attractiveness, for instance, as they might cue some underlying traits, such as for women, more physically attractive women are probably younger and also healthier. And this is something that men might want to look for. And the same in general and oversimplifying goes for men.
See, this is quite interesting. I think you're not gonna find very many skeptics of evolutionary psychological sciences listening to the show.
Mm-hmm.
But one follow-up question that I'd have on this point is that I think many people would be familiar with the idea that our preference for physical attractiveness in mates and in social partners of all varieties is probably evolved. Because, again, children attend to it. We see some cross-cultural traits that are attractive, but most strikingly, right, like people can say, oh, you know, what's attractive varies between cultures, and to an extent it does. But the fact that attractiveness is valued, that doesn't vary very much, right? Like there might be some cultures that value it more, some cultures that value it less, but there's no culture that we know of where, you know, ugly people, let's say, are prized over beautiful people. This is a form of discrimination that seems quite universal. And so I guess one question that I'd have is, do you think that the tendency to self-beautify, right, the impulse to make oneself more physically attractive, do you think that there's evolved psychology underlying that, or is that something that we learn through development, or is it some mix of both?
Mm-hmm. I think you tap on important thing. This is something also what we observed in our study. Like in our sample, 99% of participants reporting spending more than 10 minutes a day performing beauty-enhancing behaviors. And although it varied across cultures and across countries, this innate drive to do this type of activity is something that all people, or maybe not all, but almost all people around the world do. So I'd say that culture makes us do this activity differently, and in some cultures we can do, for instance, apply coal powder to our eyes. In Western cultures we would use an eyeliner to increase our the size of perceived eyes, or in ancient Rome we would also apply some other cosmetics. For instance, in South Korea we would probably, if we were women, undergo a eyelid surgery. And all of those types of activities aim to change the perception of our eyes. And the evolutionary theory provides a framework that explains the core motivation on why people do it. And in this case, according to the Q-based approach, we would guess and try to hypothesize and test if all of those activities are aimed to increase the limbal ring in our eyes, so that others would perceive us as younger, because as we age, our limbal ring, and limbal ring is something that is at the border of our iris and sclera in the eye. So as we age, these limbal rings become lighter as compared to us being younger. So if we consider that people from various cultures do this, we can, with some confidence, say that the drive to have those qualities that are perceived as being younger are valued across cultures, and that might be some evolutionary forces driving our willingness to show them and to be perceived as younger.
Interesting. So I've now got a bit of I want to get into your specific findings quickly, but first, I kind of have a logistical question. So this study that you performed had a very large sample size. I believe the final sample size was around 93,000, but there were even more participants who there was some data collected on before exclusions. How does one collect data from about 100,000 people? What are the mechanics involved there?
Oh, that I would definitely say that there was no one doing all of that work, but there was a collaborative effort of so many amazing people. In our team, we had over 400 scholars from over 100 countries. And all of those amazing people devoted their time and energy into this project, starting from translating the study materials into 45 languages, distributing the survey link and inviting all the participants through various channels, through social media, through direct messages to different people. And I wouldn't be fair not to mention my mentor, Piotr Sorokowski, who's an amazing scholar, experienced in such cross-culture research. So when I enrolled into PhD program, I got under his wings and I learned from him on how to conduct such cross-culture studies. In the past, one of the Piotr projects yielded a sample of 10,000 people. So he's a person who knows a lot about such cross-culture projects. So at first, we utilized his research network and invited scholars to join our team. And that wouldn't be possible if Piotr's previous projects weren't so successful, because then when we invited other scholars, like, hey, come on guys, join our project, we aim to collect data from many countries, and we were able to show papers from past projects. So it gave us a lot of credentials. So I believe that's why so many scholars join our project. And then there were the effort of all the participants who decided to join and decided to participate. And we also asked all of those people to share the invitation to participate in our study on their social media. So it was like a snowball rolling and increasing. And we collected data for 5 months, from April to August 2021. And with every week, the sample size increased because we were able to track it and look at it. So I was so excited during those months watching how the final sample increases. And that was really amazing. And I hope to conduct a similar study in the future.
What's so funny is that I actually jotted down to ask you while you were talking, how many years did this take? And then you say it took 5 months. That's incredible. I guess the internet makes a lot of cool things possible.
Yeah, exactly. And this is funny you mentioned, because at first in January we started to prepare the study's design and all the materials. So when I was talking with Piotr, my at the time PhD supervisor, I told him, Piotr, let's do this study. This will be part of my PhD. And he suggested it in the first place. But I said, let's do it this year. And the next I will just write everything. And he said, whoa, wait, hold on. 1 year? No, it's not possible. It usually takes a few years. And I was like, no, we got this. We can do it. So I was so confident. And I didn't know that it's not possible. So that's why probably it was, we made it together.
That's fantastic. So let's get into the results. So I've got a list of the effects you've tested, and I guess we'll just go through them. Yeah, let's just go through them one at a time. So one of the big findings that was quite interesting is that you found that on average, and this is the one you already touched on, women spend significantly more time, almost half an hour more time beautifying daily than men. Why is this an activity that women allocate more of their day to?
Since I already mentioned I come from evolutionary background, so I would use this framework to explain this result, and I will refer to our ancestral past in general, because we have to acknowledge that women have a very restricted period of fertility. Like in societies with natural birth control, it's around 37, 38 years the woman has while she has her last birth in her life. So she gives birth to the last child of hers. While for men, men can basically reproduce even till their late 60s or 70s, so the age difference is enormous. And also, female reproduction is really constricted to childbearing, labor, lactation, and postpartum. It takes a lot of time. And again, drawing from studies on societies with natural birth control, we can confidently say that the median interbirth interval ranges from 1.5 years to 2.5 years. So it means that basically after giving a birth to one child, it has to take like 2 hours for a woman to be able to give birth to another child, right? So men, in comparison, can offer their genetic material multiple times a day. So let's take this amazing example of Genghis Khan, the founder of the Great Khan and Mongol Empire. Since Y chromosome is passed on by men to their sons, we can trace back the male's Y chromosome to their ancestors, right? So scholars tracked the Y chromosome of Genghis Khan, and it appears that currently, nowadays, there are about 16 million men today that have Y chromosome from Genghis Khan. And this is rather an exception from the rule, and most men do not have so many direct descendants and so many children. But yeah, but it just shows the difference in the possible reproductive success of men as comparison to women. So as it takes two to make a child, and usually people just pair bond and stay in monogamous or serious monogamy, but in general in monogamous relationships, and they together produce an offspring. So males' reproductive success is closely linked to female reproductive success, right? A given female. So for men, if we consider all that, so for men to have the highest reproductive success, it seemed the best strategy to identify and pair bond with a woman with the largest fecundity. That is with the largest potential for reproduction, right? And for women, that would mean that she's the youngest because she has so many years ahead of her to be able to successfully reproduce. And also a woman who was the healthiest to be able to carry that really challenging time of labor, of lactation and all that stuff, and who would also be able to give birth to healthy offspring and not, for instance, die trying or give birth to unhealthy offspring. So for men in general, how can men identify that type of woman? And it appears that the most logical thing is to look for the physical attractiveness of a woman, because this might be the cue of both to youth, and to health. Well, for women, it might not be so important to identify the youngest men, because like we established, men can offer their genetic materials even to their late age. So for women, it might be more productive to find a man who would be of the highest status, who would have the highest resource potential, who could provide for the women and their offspring. So this created a different pressures for both men and women. For men started to care for the physical attractiveness more of their potential partners, while women started to care more for cues of high status for men. And of course, it's not like men consciously try to identify the youngest, the most fertile woman, and it's not like that. But in overly simplifying, if men looked for those qualities in their potential partners, they might be more reproductively successful. So they passed their own genes to the next generations, and their genes just became more popular and more spread within the population. So that's why men trying to find those mostly physically attractive women created a counter pressure for women to actually attain those physical attractiveness. The more for women, the more physically attractive I am, I have the highest chances of acquiring a potential mate with whom I can reproduce, who is also of the highest, for instance, status, social status, and who can also provide for me and my offspring. So those two things are linked. So for women, it makes more sense to try to become more physically attractive. And for men, it might make more sense to advertise their high social status. And we can talk about it in a moment, and although for men it's also important to look physically attractive, but they might be willing to cue or advertise more of different qualities than youth, while women might be more focused on trying to tap and trying to look more physically attractive to cue this youth and also being healthy.
Right. This is a pretty intuitive argument that women have more pressure to look younger and look more physically attractive because their reproductive window is shorter, and so men are going to be more keenly attuned to those things. And given that pressure, it would also make sense for women to evolve, either biologically or culturally, to attend more to their physical attractiveness. It's always struck me as a very peculiar thing about humans, though, because while it does seem patently true, if you, at least on surveys, if you ask men, they generally care more about physical attractiveness than women. There are some behavioral studies where it seems to come out less. And obviously in your research, you find that on the other side, women spend substantially more time on beauty. But it is interesting looking at other sexually selected species. It seems to be that the men, or the male birds and the male elephant seals and the male deer, they're the ones who have the fantastic, beautiful ornaments. And the females often look quite drab by comparison. And so it's interesting that in humans we have this slight equality, but also this gap in the reverse direction. I guess one curiosity question. So you surveyed 93 countries. So we have a pretty good idea of what's happening around the world in terms of beauty. Were there any samples where there was no gender difference, or even where this gender difference was reversed? Like, is there any country on Earth where men beautify more than women, or to a similar degree?
Yeah, this is incredible if you think about it, that in animal kingdom, indeed, it tends to be the other way around. We get amazing examples of, standard peacocks, but also mandrills or long-tailed widow birds or northern cardinals, where males are just incredible and they look so physically attractive, we would say, even from the perspective of their female counterparts. Females are just looking usual and
usually
not,
camouflaged,
casual.
frankly.
Yeah, exactly. So the males are those who stick out and advertise. They probably advertise their good quality and genes, great genes, to be able to withstand those pressures from the environment and still be more so visible and so attractive and trying to attract other females. But in coming back to human kingdom, let's say, so we had samples from 93 countries, and curiously, in 7 countries, we had those relationships reversed, so that we observed that, for instance, in Tunisia or in Thailand, men spend more time on enhancing their physical attractiveness compared to women. And to be honest, I have no idea why exactly that happened. The samples were not that small, because that was my first thought, that maybe we had just, around 20 or 30, 40 participants from those countries, and maybe for some reasons, particular examples and cases of men highly interested in enhancing their physical attractiveness enrolled in our study, and maybe some women who just didn't spend that much time also enrolled. But in fact, the samples from, for instance, Bolivia, which I didn't mention, was around 500. So the probability that something happened with the enrollment and particular groups participated in our study is not that high, though of course we did not have representative samples from each of the countries. Our sample in general was mostly educated, over 60% of people completed at least and got the bachelor degree. So we can't confidently say that it applies to the whole population from a given country, right? But this pattern of results really calls for further investigation, and I'm really curious why that happened. And I would love to replicate our study again in those 7 countries, so which were Tunisia, Qatar, Belarus, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Bolivia, and Jordan. I would say that out of those countries, and considering the gap between time spent enhancing physical attractiveness in women and men, we can also look more closely on the types of activities, because in general, women spend across different activities and types of activities more time enhancing their physical attractiveness, with one exception. And I'm curious, can you guess which of the activities were performed more frequently and more time men spend than women?
Oh, I mean, I can guess. I'm cheating here because I've read the study, but exercise, yes, exercise.
Yeah, exercise. It is true, but also this is at first I might surprise you, but even higher difference in time spent enhancing one's physical attractiveness was not exercise, but was makeup. And if we compare, for instance, how much time men who apply makeup and women who apply makeup spend, this difference was huge. For instance, in the United States, men on average who applied makeup do it for 100 minutes a day, as compared to women doing it for 22 minutes.
You picked up James Charles. You're picking up male beauty influencers, the makeup artists.
Yeah, no, but it's logical if you think about, if a man applies a makeup, it's probably a man with some special qualities or needs, or for other reasons he's interested in doing it. So it makes sense that if he decides to do it, then he probably spends more time than women. But apart from this particular example, it was exercise.
So I understand, and so listeners don't get confused. The finding is that most men don't apply makeup, but those that do apply it more than women who wear makeup. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes. Thank you for this clarification. Of course.
Yeah. That would be a really shocking result if on average. Yeah. So I guess. I mean, the gender reversed countries are certainly interesting to me. I don't suppose you have any theories for why the gender gap would reverse. I mean, one thing that comes to mind would be that maybe Qatar, that's where I generally fly through, and it's a relatively conservative Islamic country, and so it could be that women are wearing the veil, let's say, and so maybe they just don't have to they don't have to undergo certain beautification activities because their faces are covered. But I'm not sure. Yeah. There's some, but that doesn't explain Thailand, and so there must be maybe these are special cases that each have special explanations. But wow, really interesting. I don't know if you have any ideas, but
Well, to be honest, that was my first hypothesis, as you just mentioned, that maybe in some countries such as Iran, where women wear hijab or other type of clothes that cover their faces, their bodies, maybe in that countries women are less prone to enhancing their physical attractiveness. But in fact, we studied it in a separate study. And that was already peer-reviewed and published. We compared time spent enhancing physical attractiveness, and in particular applying makeup and applying cosmetics in Iran and in Poland. So in Poland, we have freedom in how we choose to dress. So we can choose in really clothes, body revealing clothes, as compared to Iran, where women usually wear those traditional types of clothes. So we hypothesized that, yeah, women probably spend more time in Poland as compared to Iran in terms of their bodies. But we hypothesized that since in Iran mostly women have uncovered their faces and their eyes, they might be more focused on those areas of their bodies. So they might be willing to spend more time on enhancing their physical attractiveness of their faces and eyes. But in fact, we did not find it. We observed that Polish women exceeded time spent on enhancing their both whole bodies and also both their faces and eyes regions as compared to Iran. And when you think about it, it's like, yeah, well, in Iran, the traditional norms aren't favoring women applying so much makeup and rather being so more modest. So this is a mixed result that requires more attention and more further studies, and I would love to disentangle on those particular cases. And as you said, that might be some really cultural explanation for each of those countries. But when it comes to this gender gap and why in some countries it's higher and why in some countries it's smaller, so I followed up exploratively these type of questions on our data, and that was not part of the published paper. But what I did is I aggregated the average time spent enhancing one's physical attractiveness by women and men in a given country, and I used those aggregate values and tried to explain it in regular regression with some country level variables that I thought that might be related. So I checked like if a sample or if a given country median of age is higher, maybe this gap might be explained by this variable or maybe countries' level of individualism or collectivism or gender equality or income inequality. So on those aggregated values, I did not find any evidence for significant links except for gross domestic product per capita. The smaller the gap between men and women, the higher the gross domestic product. And this can be related to some economic reasons.
So richer countries, in richer countries, there's a smaller gap, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And
okay, cool.
Exactly. And we might say that, is it men spending more time increasing their physical attractiveness in those countries with higher gross domestic product? Or maybe women spend less time. So, I was entering a muddy water and try to disentangle it by running separate analysis for women and men. And I'm not really confident in those results, meaning that, we aggregate, we transform variables. So that definitely requires some more better tailored analysis to answer this question. But in general, I rather observed that it was women spending less time in countries with higher gross domestic product / with higher modernization levels. Yeah, so maybe
so it didn't really look like men's values were coming up with wealth. It was that women's values were going down.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe they pursued professional careers. Maybe they had less time in general to devote to caring for themselves. Maybe they had, more job-related responsibilities or also familial responsibilities and all that. The day has only 24 hours, right? So we cannot squeeze more time and do other stuff. We just have to drop some things and prioritize, and that might be the case. But in general, I would like to say that I'm not sure, I don't know, and this requires further investigation.
Fascinating. Okay, well, I wanna try and move on from gender, but unfortunately I've got a few more questions on this topic. So I've shared your study. I've shared your study on social media, and I've also spoken about it on podcasts that I've done when they ask about beautification. It's something that I commonly cite. And one skeptical take that I sometimes hear back. So there's the basic gender gap where women spend more time, right? Mm-hmm. But one skeptical response is that some of male beautification strategies might take more exertion or effort. For instance, if I spend, several hours a week lifting weights, right, that might take less time than a daily makeup, cosmetics, fashion routine, but it may require more exertion, right? This isn't something that I necessarily believe, but it is an interesting point. Is it possible, I guess we can use this as a platform to ask more generally, what do you think about time as a measure of effort? And did you consider other metrics such as money or personal importance? What made you settle on time as the measure to run with?
Mm-hmm. This is a definitely great point, and it would be great to look at all the metrics beyond time to compare those sex differences and beautification practices, because as you said, I like this idea of energy expenditure, because definitely the amount of effort men sometimes do to enhance their attractiveness by working out at gym would supersede all the efforts done by women in terms of the caloric, for instance, expenditure. How much time does it take a woman to apply a makeup? But apart from that energy expenditure, I think we can pretty confidently say that women undertake just a broader range of beautification activities. So we could just count how many different types of activities men and women do to enhance their attractiveness, and I believe that women would just do more of that. Because for men, I think the variety of different things they can do to enhance their activities, physical attractiveness, is somehow limited. Though it's changing. For instance, there are more and more cosmetics nowadays, and more companies target men, trying to say that this is a particularly male cosmetic, and they usually come in like dark packages with a great and big etiquette for men or male, so that men wouldn't feel, somehow feminine about buying it. But yeah, we chose time as its pretty universal thing, and since for instance countries and people differ in how much money they earn, the fact that how much time they have in a day is pretty fixed, though we can obviously say that some people work less, some people work more, and the free time they have varies. But in general, time is quite universal metric, though we could also focus, like other researchers. For instance, there was a study conducted in Netherlands where scholars focus on the frequency of applying cosmetics, right, in a day, how many times people, for instance, use a hand cream or wash their hands. We can also look at there was another study in France where scholars looked at the amount of cosmetics. Like there were even cool photographs of how much hand cream people, men and women, use on a one take to cover their hands or even bodies, like body lotions. And also there were cool studies from Brazil that Brazilian scholars, for instance Varela and colleagues and Mafra and colleagues, they tend to focus on money investment and compare how much money men and women spend on cosmetics and different types of products, and usually it's women who spend more, though there are some exceptions. For instance, in an Indian Kerala state, one study found that it's men who spend more money on cosmetics. So there are so many different metrics, and I would love to compare all of them because it can, as you said, vary. But out of all of those types of metrics that I just mentioned, I think that the energy expenditure would be probably the only one in which men would actually score higher than women because of the physical exercises they do, and body lifting and body weighting.
Very interesting. Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sold on time as the best of options. Again, the universality is quite appealing. All right, I'm gonna try and pry myself off of gender here. You found a pretty strange effect with age, but it was a bit complicated. Would you mind explaining it to the audience?
Sure. So let's use a concrete example. So we found that on average, across our sample, 18-year-old women spend 63 more minutes a day enhancing her physical attractiveness than a 45-year-old woman. And 60-year-old woman spends 30 minutes more per day on average than this middle-aged 45-year-old woman. So the effect we observed was not a linear, but like a U-shape, with younger people spending more time than middle-aged people and older people spending more time than middle-aged people. And I believe that the first part of this equation, like the younger people spending the most time on enhancing their physical attractiveness, is quite intuitive, right? Because younger people are more focused, for instance, on finding and acquiring potential mate. So they might be more willing to invest in their physical attractiveness to attract a potential mate. While the other part of the equation, the fact that older, like 60 years old people spend more time than those middle-aged people, requires some further explanation. And the first part of this thing is that middle-aged people spend the least time on enhancing their physical attractiveness. And that might be just because of the social roles they have, right? They have, at this age, probably children who they still need to take care of. They have jobs that they have to spend their time on and focus on. They might be just tired. I conducted another study, which I can explain later if you're curious, that consistently found all of my participants consistently say that at this age, middle-aged women, they're just so tired of all the responsibilities they have, and they just cease to care about their look because they simply don't have enough time to do all of the things they need to do and also care for themselves. But something appears to change when you're older, when we have, for instance, 60 or more years old. And although it's tempting to say that this is like a universal thing, I believe that the part of the reason on why we observe this result might be connected to survival bias. Like, if you're 60 years old and you're willing to participate in a research that is conducted online, then it might mean that you're more fortunate than some of your peers, right?
Yes.
So if you're 60 years old and if you have a good health and time and probably resources to live your day, and you have energy to enroll into a study, then it means that probably you're also in a good shape and you can attend to your health and your physical attractiveness. The fact that you notice the passage of time, the impact of time, imprint of time on your body, on your face, that you just see that your body changes in time. So if you have so much free time on your hands and energy, you, by observing this difference in your body, you might just be more willing to counteract it and invest in your appearance to maintain a bit younger and to combat those visible signs of aging. So I believe that might be part of the reason. And if we were to conduct a study on a representative samples of 60 or 70 years old, that we might not observe such prominent increase in time spent enhancing one's physical attractiveness. Though again, because of the survival bias, if you, for instance, suffered through your life with pathogenic diseases and other stresses, you might not live up to this age in good health to actually do anything about how you look like.
Right. So there's a literal survivorship bias and a and a traditional one. Yeah. I mean that's funny. So those are three, I think, really good hypotheses. We've got the idea that people are really busy in their middle age, but then they get slightly less busy, and then very less busy when they retire. And then this survivorship bias idea. And it's funny you mentioned the noticing the passage of time. I spoke to an older academic about this result. And they said, well, as you get older, your beautification behavior shifts from, attracting a mate to not looking disgusting. And and I think there might be some truth to that as well. And you kind of hinted at it in a much more polite way that, like as you get much older, maybe you notice things that are more stressful and they're just more time consuming to deal with. Like it's much harder to have, let's say a great body at 60 versus 30 or 40. Another effect that I'd like to talk about is the biggest effect in the study, at least insofar as I'm aware, social media. So you asked participants at an individual level, how long do you spend on social media and how long do you consume other types of media as well? And I believe that was the largest effect size out of all the variables you mentioned: age, sex, GDP, and gender equality, all these national level variables, individualism, SES. The thing that had the most predictive power in determining how many minutes a day you spent on your physical appearance was how many minutes a day you spent scrolling on your phone. Why does social media have such a strong effect on beautification?
Yeah, but we have to highlight that our study was observational, so we cannot infer causation. So we actually don't know if people who are more focused on enhancing their physical attractiveness also, as a result of that, spend more time on social media. Like they look for inspirations on how to improve their attractiveness. They compare themselves with others. They want to look even better than others on social media. For instance, they online shop for beauty products, etc. So we cannot, from our study, establish that this is this way around, right? So we cannot say that if you spend more time on social media, it means that you will focus more on your physical attractiveness. Though my intuition tells me that that probably is the case. So we wanted to disentangle it even more because, as you said, it was the largest effect. So the difference in time spent enhancing one's physical attractiveness between those who spend more time on social media and less time, it was in hours. Like on average, it was about an hour. If people spend the most time on social media, they also spend on average more than an hour a day enhancing their physical attractiveness.
People just having too much free time on their hands.
That might also be the case. Yeah, that's true. But in general, people who spend most of the time on social media also tend to spend a lot of time enhancing their physical attractiveness. And I believe this taps to our general innate inclination to compare ourselves with others. Like this is something I remember from one of the first classes at my university when I was a master's student. One of the lecturers told us, like, look guys, we are first humans and only then psychologists, because my background is psychology. And I would expand this maxima, this phrase into we're first humans and then anything else. So what also applies to us is our innate willingness to compare with other people. And in social media, if we look, like social media are full of other beautiful people, and what we tend to forget, because again we are first humans than anything else, we tend to forget that those pictures are really prepared to be so beautiful. So behind every, maybe not every, but behind many influencers, stars that post such beautiful pictures, there are a whole bunch of people stand to make this picture look so beautiful. And at first we tend to forget about it. We just look at those pictures and say, wow, this is a beautiful person. And oh shoot, then we look at the mirror and we don't see something as spectacular as in those photographs. And we tend to forget that those people also, when they wake up in the morning, they don't look that perfect. Then we can rationalize it and think about it and say, yeah, it's true that they don't look like that. And we know it. If we ask anyone, there are some studies showing that if you ask someone that, hey, is this person really looking like that in a real life as in this picture? People say, no, not really. The picture is altered. The person is wearing tons of makeup. They probably had some plastic aesthetic surgeries. But in the first moment, when you look at those pictures, we might be just prone to feeling worse. Our self-esteem decreases, our body satisfaction decreases. In fact, we follow up this study with another study. It's currently I'm writing up the results, but in general, we conducted a experimental study in which we primed our female participants with either social media perfect images or neutral abstract paintings. We put a head tussling device, we call it head tussling device, on their heads, but we told our participants that this will track the movements of your heads. So the participants believed that they were wearing something that tracked their movements of their heads. So they watched those pictures, either supermodels or neutral paintings. They answered a bunch of questions that we wanted to ask, so to validate the whole experiment. We took off the head-mounted display from their heads, which tousled their hair. Right? So participants had this thing removed from their head, and we left those participants in the room still capturing their behaviors by cameras. And they were aware of the cameras, but they were not aware of the real purpose of the experiment. So they were left alone in the room for 2 minutes, and by a chance there was a mirror in the left side of the room, which was pretty visible, but not so obviously visible for participants, so that would think that, this mirror, something is off. This mirror, the goal of this experiment is different. No, we asked the participants afterwards what they thought about the experiment and what the real hypothesis was. So they were left in the room, their hair was a mess, and we then coded their behaviors. So we observed that if our participants were primed with supermodels, when they were left alone in the room, they more frequently looked at the mirror and they more frequently tried to adjust their hair. So we can confidently say that there might be an effect, casual effect, from looking at the perfect models in social media, and also just looking at physical attractive people, and the real behavior of people afterwards.
Oh my God, that study design is sensational. Is that published?
No, not yet. We finished data collection. Like I said, I'm writing the results, so it was not peer reviewed. But
after it is, you have to send it to me. I'm gonna make a TikTok on it. I think that's
sure.
so funny. I think that's so funny.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say that the coding was so fun afterwards, because watching how people reacted. Of course, so we told participants what was the real goal afterwards. They were debriefed, and we also asked them if they still want to participate in the study, or we should just delete the data. And in fact, all of the people said that, yeah, okay, use it. It's a cool idea, and I didn't think you were studying it. So there was some positive feedback.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that experiment wouldn't have worked on me. I definitely would have fixed my hair anyway. But I guess one thing that's quite intuitive here about the social media thing is, as you say, it's not just that these influencers don't look like themselves, right? So they're obviously they're only posting their best photo, and then in many cases their photo is all the way from lightly edited at a minimum, I'd say, to completely photoshopped, right? It's just not them anymore. There's a filter or some more sophisticated things going on. But then not only do they not look like themselves, they don't look like anything we would have seen in our ancestry. So hunter-gatherers, we lived as hunter-gatherers for most of our evolutionary history, and hunter-gatherer groups range in size, and it's possible that, during the peak of human hunter-gathering, group sizes were larger, but they certainly weren't, 4 billion people or whatever it is that's on social media. And so when you go on social media, you're seeing... let's say you would meet less than 1,000 people, and that's a high estimate, less than 1,000 people in your life as a hunter-gatherer back in the day, maybe as low as 150. That's, some people have said that, but let's put it at 1,000. That's still a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the number of people that you see on social media. And then social media filters for the most attractive people. And so your kind of ape brain might be well adapted to being like, oh, these are the people around me. These are my competitors. I can handle this, right? From a physical attractive, some people are more attractive, some people are less attractive, but I'm fine. And now we've created this device that we pick up every day, and then we dose ourselves with, the top 0.001% of physically attractive people, who have then selected their top 0.1% of their most attractive photo, and then they've edited that photo. And so what you get, our poor brains are just so poorly adapted to seeing this. It's like, oh, anxiety attack. Like, I can't compete with this. I gotta spend some time in front of the mirror. I mean, that's, this is me kind of speculating, but it does seem that we're, let's say, poorly adapted for the technology that we've created for ourselves from a self-esteem perspective. I mean, you can imagine how warped things could become. I guess you could take an example that would be, some men listening might find this to be a familiar experience, which is you work out a lot, you lift a bunch of weights, and maybe you're one of the most muscular guys that in the real world. But when you look at yourself in the mirror, you think that, you're super skinny because you're comparing yourself to these incredible influencers who have, the highest tier of muscularity and have, used these exogenous hormones and edited their photos and so on and so forth. You can get a really warped perspective. Do you have any, and I know that, science is descriptive, not prescriptive, but do you have any advice for navigating these kind of social media morasses in a more healthy way?
First of all, I couldn't agree more with you and with your perfect description of the reality and on how it is. And second of all, I'm really not an expert on this. And as you said, science is more about description and not prescription. So I can only speak based on my knowledge and my own intuition. And on this topic, I'm a fatalist. So I believe that we are just creatures that evolved and currently are lagging behind. Our evolutionary brain is just lagging behind the technology. And there's this great quote from Wilson who said something like, I might just paraphrase it, but in general, the idea was that currently we have Paleolithic emotions, but code-like technology. And I so believe it's true. So we still need to adapt to how the current world looks like and what the technology and opportunities are for us. But in general, the easiest way would be just quit using social media. But more realistically, I think it's not going to happen. As in, it's not going to work for any of us, me included. So what I'm trying to do, and perhaps it might be useful to anyone else, so I selectively consume social media. I know that I'm a mother right now, so I'm following many profiles of other mothers and try to keep up with the trends and, all the fancy foods, how to prepare it for my kid.
And they all look fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And then I look at the plate I prepared for my child and I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't like to eat it if I were to eat at the other plate of the perfect influencer. But what I've noticed, what works for me is to just unfollow the profiles that make me feel bad and just live my life and just search for information I need or just, try to limit the exposure to those idealized pictures, because ultimately, like I said, we're all humans in the first place. So although I know that it doesn't look like that every day, even for that perfect mother from social media, I still am to feel a little bit worse after watching it and comparing it with what I have. So I just decided to limit it and to unfollow the things, the profiles that make me feel bad, and afterwards also think that rationalize it and just repeat to myself a few times that it's not like that. Like, social media reality and real life reality kind of differ, and just try to remember about it. But yeah,
switching gears a little bit, but I guess it's similar in the sense that causation could plausibly be in either direction. I believe you found that people who perceive themselves as more attractive spend more time on their looks. And I guess at first this was kind of counterintuitive to me. I mean, I could see it both ways. I mean, if you had found that less attractive people spent more on their looks, that would make sense to me as well. It's like trying to compensate, or having, low self-esteem and trying to fill that hole. What did you make of that association? Because I could see the causation being reversed here, and people spending more time on their looks and that time being effective, making them more attractive. But I want to get your take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're correct. We observed that indeed more attractive people spend more time on their looks, and we can hypothesize that they just simply want to stay stay attractive, stay beautiful, because beautiful people, as we already established, derive of all the benefits of being physically attractive, and they probably want to retain all of those benefits. And indeed, we can ask ourselves, what's the first, egg or a hen? Is it like the more time you spend on attractiveness, the more physically attractive or maybe it's just you're born naturally physically attractive and you just want to stay that way? But in general, if we look at this effect more closely, we can observe that indeed, although most of the time spent on physical attractiveness was performed by people the mostly physically attractive by self-ratings. But the second group that was following this first group was people who believed that they were the least physically attractive. So the least time spent on physical attractiveness was spent by people somewhere in the middle, right? So who aren't really physically attractive and who aren't really unphysically attractive, but also, again, this is something that they self-rated, so we have to keep it in mind that it's not objectively perceived by others. Though with some confidence we can say that those two ratings tend to converge, especially for those middle and highly attractive people. So our study cannot show which is what, but there is some initial evidence from Brazil, from Anchieta and colleagues, sorry if I mispronounced the name, who recently published a study in which they provided one of the first, I believe, evidence that people who spend time on enhancing their physical attractiveness and in particular applying makeup do feel better afterwards, in such a way that not only better, but also their self-esteem increases, their ratings of their own attractiveness increases. But it was a really cool study because they not only applied makeup to participants, the female participants, like real makeup, but they also simulated applying makeup. So a professional beautician artist pretended applying makeup to those people, and those people were then asked how they feel, how they look like in the mirror. And that's funny because between simulation makeup and the real makeup, there were no differences in appearance satisfaction and attractiveness ratings. So
that's funny.
Women, if they thought that they were made up by a professional, they still felt more attractive as compared to not being made up. But there were no differences between real makeup and simulated makeup. So, but yeah, in general, I believe that that there might be just a positive loop. The more time you spend enhancing your attractiveness, then you don't do it. Usually, you don't do it so badly that there is no effect. At least some things you do, in fact, do increase how you look like. So the more you do it, the more physically attractive you feel, and also you're perceived by others. So
Interesting. You also found some other social predictors. So take this in any order you like. Apologize for the shotgun question, but you found that richer, less educated, and more right-wing people generally spent more time on their looks. What's up with those associations?
This is really interesting because we tested all those variables together. So we control for others by testing each of those. And the links were not obvious, at least at first, because you would say that education and wealth do come hand in hand, in pair, right? More wealthy people in general, on average, tend to be more educated. But we found those effects a little bit reversed. And also the same goes with political beliefs. And that's something I really looked into. And we can have some like iconic examples of, say, Donald Trump or Ronald Reagan from the United States that we would probably find that those two people would score higher than other politicians in terms of time spent enhancing their physical attractiveness.
Yeah, Donald Trump's hair routine must take hours alone, right? I mean, it's like a multi-layered comb-over.
Yeah. So yeah, this is more of anecdotal evidence. We would have to look more closely at all politicians to comfortably say what's that and if this effect really holds. But considering our participants who believed, though, again, participants who were more right-wing, believed in more emphasize traditional values and social norms, because this is in fact what right-wing means and entails. So for those people, social status and hierarchy might be more important, and the ways in which we can highlight our social standing and high status or dominance might be manifested by physical attractiveness. And more specifically, for instance, for men, that would be caring for attire, right? Elegant attire, or caring for hair, shaving facial hair, and things like that. And for women, if we say how in conservative manners, how women should present, we would probably say, or at least I would say, that women should dress nicely. And this is something I checked, because like we mentioned at the beginning, we had several types of different activities people could do to enhance their attractiveness. So following this logic, we should observe that more right-wing men should care more about how they dress and how their hair present than those men who are more left-wing. And for women, like I said, I would hypothesize that more right-wing women would care more about their dresses than left-wing women. So I checked it, and in fact, that's what we observed.
Wow.
So yeah, that might a bit vouch for those hypotheses, but still, this is something that we only had one question on political beliefs and on education and on wealth. So definitely would have to look at other, for instance, more objective measures or behavioral measures to really tap into that. So this is the political part. And what about, let's take the wealth. So we observed that more wealthy people spend more time enhancing their physical attractiveness. And we can again refer to social class and differences in what are the norms in higher classes. So for richer individuals, spending time and resources on appearance can be a way to signal their actual economic standing and high status, right? Especially during social occasions, having a neat attire, being slim, especially in Western context, especially for women, that things are probably more expected to see. You can imagine like a social event of a high social class with, women in beautiful long dresses, men with attires, drinking champagne from glasses. So that image just crossed my mind when I was thinking about this result. And especially, if you're more wealthy, then you can afford to high quality clothing, you can afford to grooming products and frequent visits at hair salons. And you can also have spare more time exercising, and I believe this all might explain this result. And at the same time, education. This is interesting because we found that less educated people tended to spend more time enhancing their physical attractiveness, and
after controlling for wealth, right? So yeah. So for people
educators.
listening at home, like if you held wealth constant, which you can't do in the real world, but you can in statistics, then education, being more educated, would produce less beautification. Am I correct in?
Exactly. That's what we observe. And in fact, we can think about the fact that usually people who are less educated hold, on average, more gender unequal views. So they support traditional gender roles with feminine women and masculine men. And this might mean that for women to care for how they look more than more educated women, because more educated women might again have professional jobs and careers that just simply take a lot of time from their regular day, so there's no that much time to care for how they look. And the similar thing might go to men. In fact, if you're probably less educated man, then you probably adhere to this view that men should be masculine, and if we say masculine, that probably more muscular, and you tend to have this pressure to conform to this gender unequal view. And this is also what we observe in terms of gender equality on an individual level, right? So not only women, but also men who believe in traditional gender roles spend more time on enhancing their physical attractiveness.
Interesting. See, this is a bit of a counterintuitive result, that men who believe in gender equality less spend more time on their beauty, all things considered. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, exactly.
Wow. I mean,
Exactly.
I guess with some forms, like there's some research indicating that conservative males are, I think that they're either perceived as or actually stronger and spend more time in the gym and are more into weightlifting and things like that. But other than that, you would think, right, that, or at least I would think, that men who are really into the traditional gender roles would be like, oh, there's no way that I'm spending time in the mirror. There's no way that I'm, using retinol or whatever new cosmetics out there. And, I'm picking an outfit, that's for sissies. There's no way I'm doing that. So I'm kind of surprised. Do you want to talk more on that? Or the women's side of thing isn't surprising at all, but the men's side does kind of take me off guard.
Yeah, exactly. That was also my reaction. I was actually targeting at first a hypothesis concerning women, and that's what I hypothesized, and my team hypothesized, that we should observe rather this effect in women and not in men. And if in men, then probably reversed. But in fact, more traditional men who believed in traditional role division spend more time enhancing their attractiveness. And if you think more deeply into this question, so let's say concrete examples, let's choose two countries, and by saying it I will oversimplify, and we have to remember that in those countries there are individuals who believe differently, but in general we observe that in Norway, a country with higher gender equality, men spend less time enhancing their attractiveness as compared to, for instance, Pakistan, which is more gender unequal country, with traditional division of men being breadwinners, women being housewives. But instead, what we observe is that men in Pakistan spend actually more time enhancing their attractiveness. And I think this also relates to part of our previous conversation, that in such conditions, when men believe that they should be masculine, the way they can signal their masculinity, their dominance, their status, their power might be through physical attractiveness. So men might be more focused to trimming their beard, looking elegant, having an elegant attire. Men might just feel pressure, social pressure, to invest time in enhancing their physical attractiveness to conform to those expectations. And if they believe that genders should be equal, they might not be so pressured into attaining this high social norm of being a masculine man. That might in part explain the result for men. And I follow up this study with another study in which I conducted semi-structured, in-depth interviews from members of 4 societies. and I was including Pakistan, Guatemala, and Cook Island and Poland. And I precisely talked with Pakistani men and asked them how much time they spend on attractiveness. And each man from that society, and again, I didn't, conduct a study on a representative sample of Pakistani men, but each man highlighted that for him, how he presents himself is really important.
Wow.
And this is something that we tend to forget, because if we think physical attractiveness, we might see in our minds an image of a beautiful woman who, has lustrous eyes, has symmetrical face, has great large eyes, and this image appears. But when we think about physical attractiveness also signaling status, there's also a man who, looks prominent and signals his wealthiness, his status, that he's just a really manly man, I'd say.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, this is making me have a kind of funny thought, and maybe, I'll listen back to this and think it's a terrible idea. But certainly in America, we see that anecdotally, the people who would make fun of men for using makeup, make fun of, pretty boys, make fun of men for being vain, those would typically be, at least in a stereotypical way, those would typically be more socially conservative males. Whereas more socially liberal males are more likely to be, kind of, if you want to wear makeup, go for it, that sort of thing. What if it's beauty is more important to these more conservative males, and because of that, they try to suppress competition by bullying other males for engaging in it, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's just just a little idea.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I would love to explore it further.
Because we do see that with women, that beauty is more important to women than men on average.
Yeah.
And women tend to bully each other for their appearance more than men do, right? Men are much less likely to call another man ugly. So maybe this is kind of a similar thing where it's like in the subgroup of males who really care about the way they look, they're the ones who are most anxious about saying, oh, he's a pretty boy, he's vain, that kind of thing. But maybe I'm overthinking it. And obviously, one culture, not a great idea. When in Pakistan it might be completely different.
Yeah, true. But yeah, this is also true that women tend to derogate their potential rivals by diminishing the physical attractiveness of other women, or also by referring to their social sexuality and promiscuity. But in general, definitely, women tend to punish other physically attractive women. Like in one of the studies I mentioned, I conducted interviews, and I remember one example of a Polish woman who said that, oh, I have this terrible friend at my job, and she's always so made up, she looks so perfect, her dress is so nice, she's wearing so high heels, it's so uncomfortable, so we hate her. But all the men in the bureau was like, look up to her and invite her to drinks and just bring her some gifts. And that was funny to notice and observe the differences in the reactions of men and women to more physically attractive women.
Yep, this is something that once you notice it, you really can't unnotice it, which is that so much of what people bully and get upset about is just intrasexual competition.
Yeah.
So in the same way that women might, bully each other by pointing out, oh, she's actually not that good looking, or oh, she's easy, she gets around quite a bit. Men might bully each other by, saying the typical things like, oh, he's broke, that sort of thing. But on the pretty boy lens, the whole like bullying other men for engaging in beautification behavior, part of that is going to be just trying to suppress competition, right? It's easier to look better than the other men if you bully them into not looking so good. And we also see that with romantic gestures. So men will bully other men for being too romantic or being too generous to women. The phrase in, kind of Western English internet lingo is a simp. When a man, gives a woman too much money or is too romantic to her, or that sort of thing, other men will say, oh, he's a simp. It's kind of the male equivalent of a slut in sense that it's not, it's not that he's getting around a lot, it's that he's giving resources away too easily and making it too hard on everyone else to compete. So anyway.
I love this line of thought that, intrasexual competition is just so powerful, and we tend to not analyze and go behind the scenes and behind the mirror on what's actually there and what's actual motivation of people. But you perfectly described it.
Like, it's kind of funny. It's like, why is she angry at her coworker wearing high heels? And it's like, oh, that's it's because guys like it. That's why she's angry, right? In the same way, it's like, oh, why is he mad at this guy for, showing up with flowers on the first date? And it's like, oh, because girls like that kind of thing, maybe. Anyway, another subject, you found mixed results when testing a very famous within EvPsych hypothesis. It goes back to the 90s, the pathogen prevalence view, which has always had mixed results, but it's not that famous outside of EvPsych, and it's a bit of a tricky one. So for folks at home, what is the pathogen prevalence hypothesis, and what does it have to do with beautification, and what did you find or not find in this area?
Sure. So the pathogen prevalence hypothesis posits that there are pathogens, viruses, that can be transmitted from one person to another. So if we get infected, then we have to combat a serious disease, potentially resulting in prolonged illness, a vulnerability, or in worst case scenario, even death. So over time, we and other mammals developed a set of mechanisms to protect against those threats, including our immune system and our behavioral avoidance systems. So the latter tells us, for instance, that if someone has visible symptoms like rashes, coughing, or other indicators of disease, our whole body, our instincts tell us that to keep a distance from this person, right? So this aversion to potential health threats can be considered like a survival mechanism designed to reduce the risk of infections. And this is tied to our perception of attractiveness, because people who tend to look healthy also tend to look more attractive, at least from perception of others. And subconsciously, we tend to associate health with a lower likelihood of carrying infectious diseases, right? This kind of makes sense. And conversely, if someone displays signs of diseases, that can trigger a disgust response from us, and we tend to not want to get engaged with that person or come into closer proximity. And again, this also tackles into perception of attractiveness. If someone is less physically attractive with those visible signs of disease like spots or marks on their faces, that might be for us a sign that this person is struggling with some diseases, and we tend to not want to get engaged in that person. And also, if this person has some visible signs of diseases, that might mean that their immune system and in general the quality of their bodies might not be perfect, and we might also not want our offspring to be so prone to catching other infectious diseases and also struggling so much with fighting them off, right? So this is hypothesized to be linked to our perception and mechanism and willingness to assess more physically attractive people as more healthy. So in general, in pathogen-rich environments, these signs of diseases and signs of health and attractiveness might be more important. So people might go to greater lengths to enhance their physical attractiveness, using cosmetics or other means of enhancing one's attractiveness to either signal their health or just to mask their imperfections and mask those signs, traces of diseases they suffered from. And we found inconsistent results because we used two measures of pathogen prevalence on a country level. We first used a Murray and Schaller index, pathogen prevalence index, which is an index which they developed based on historical data of how much and the severity in general of transmittable diseases across different countries. And they use different encyclopedias and historical chronicles to assess it, and say, for instance, resulting in, for instance, Burkina Faso having a higher pathogen prevalence index than, for instance, say, United States. Because pathogenic diseases such as malaria or leishmaniasis or dengue was more severe in Burkina Faso than, for instance, in the United States. And we also used a Finker and colleagues index, which is more tapping into contemporary situation, pathogen prevalence situation in a given country. And we found that the first index, using historical data, how it used to be, how severe the diseases were in the past, tended not to be related to time spent enhancing physical attractiveness, but the second measure, the second index of country level pathogen prevalence, was related to time spent enhancing one's physical attractiveness, in that the more pathogens in a given environment in a given country, the more time people spend on enhancing their physical attractiveness. And that might also explain some of the past results, because the pathogen prevalence index tends to not consistently show the same patterns of results. So we hypothesized that might be the reason. Like, currently the times are changing, the health situation in different countries becomes better, the healthcare becomes better, the globalization is happening, so some diseases in some countries tend to be better fight off. There are vaccines, there are medicaments who help to fight those diseases. So in future studies, I want to, and I will probably use the second measure, like the contemporary, and establish how it currently is, because that might better approximate the current situations that the participants are living in. But yeah, in general, the conclusion is that we found mixed results on the country level pathogen prevalence index, but pretty consistent result on the individual level index. The more pathogenic diseases a person suffered from in their life, the more time they spent enhancing their physical attractiveness. And we may hypothesize that from one hand, they might be more willing to cover the imperfections that those diseases probably left on their bodies, on their faces, for instance, and they may also advertise even more their physical attractiveness and their current physical good health. So these are our two possible routes by why we observed what we observed.
Do you think that the explanation at the individual level is similar to the hypothesized relationships at the cultural or country level?
Yeah, I think so, because the individual conditions that a person lives in also can be explained by the whole environment that they're living in. So
right.
In general, countries with more severe pathogen prevalence also tends to be countries with, for instance, lower gross domestic product. And we also need to remember that in tropical conditions and tropical environments, those diseases are more prevalent. So the pressure to withstand those potential diseases and viruses is in general higher than in countries with higher latitude, where the environmental and climate differs and in general leaves a different pressure on a given individual. And I think that those two measures on an individual and country level do converge and are closely related to each other.
Interesting. So, switching gears a bit, one thing that I've been thinking about in the lead up to this is just the sheer variation in appearance alteration, right? Like among the Aka, they might use knives to sharpen their teeth, whereas in Australia or in the UK or really across, industrialized countries, it's pretty common to use, Invisalign or braces to straighten the teeth, right? These sophisticated contraptions. Among the Maasai, it would be pretty common to paint one's skin, right? That's something that we don't typically do. Paint one's skin a completely different color, red, using ochre. Whereas, again, in somewhere like Melbourne, right, where I live, it would be pretty common to get permanent pictures drawn on the skin by injecting ink in the process of tattooing. So human appearance enhancement across cultures varies to such a spectacular degree. Did you have concerns in comparing cross-cultural rates of variation in beautification that you might miss some of the more culturally unique beauty activities which vary so wildly between cultures?
Oh, absolutely. While large-scale studies provide broad insights, they may also overlook specific cultural practices and nuances. And it's essential to complement such studies with more focused and qualitative research to capture diverse beautification behaviors. In our study, we employed a quantitative ethic approach. So in general, we took the outsider's perspective and we used standardized measures and statistical inferences to facilitate cross-culture comparisons. And the other, the so-called emic approach, is a more qualitative approach, and this second approach allows to disentangle those complex links and interrelationships between and within a given country and culture, and that might allow to better take those differences and try to better describe them. So in such study, that might be not possible to go into details and assess the specific cultural differences in beauty-enhancing behaviors. But what we did is to follow up this study with another one. But before I say a few words about the other one, I would also highlight that the current database from this study offers an interesting way to discover more detailed cross-cultural differences. I haven't touched upon it yet, but that might be a job for anyone. Maybe someone who is listening would be interested to delve into that, because in our survey, we also asked participants if they do anything other than the list of activities that we already mentioned and listed, right? So do you do anything else that it's not listed to enhance your physical attractiveness? And that was a text entry. So each participant could write anything they wanted in that text entry option. And many, in fact, did. And I gotta admit that I did not look through all the responses in our
there's
normal
93,000, so
exactly. So
I'm not going to blame you for that.
that would be too much. Maybe like a hour or two. Maybe that's a PhD type of thing to do. But anyway, what I did is I eyeballed the Polish data of around 700 people, and I was so surprised what people actually wrote there. So recurring motives there were pretty much many activities that should be tapped into the ones we listed. For instance, people mentioned, for instance, wearing jewelry, right, or expensive watches, and you might say, okay, but isn't like the part of the attire and clothing. People also mentioned, for instance, going to hair salons and doing manicure, pedicure, and also, again, we might ask them, maybe that's part of the caring for body hygiene, but people also listed it here. I was surprised to see that many people, for instance, listed sleeping like a physical attractiveness enhancing behavior, like
Beauty
getting
sleep.
enough sleep, maybe. Yeah, but if you're not sleeping enough, then your eyes are baggy and black eye. You have black eyes, so that definitely decreases attractiveness. So people frequently mention this, and also some mention aesthetic surgeries, which we did not include as a separate category because it's not so common compared to other activities we do include it. But many people actually wrote that they just injected some Botox or increased their lips or stuff like that.
Sorry to interrupt, but that did come to mind as a very high effort, medium to high risk, and high cost thing that people do to improve their appearance that would actually be quite low on minutes. Like, how many minutes a year do you spend getting a facelift, right? It might be, it might be pretty well distributed compared to something like the gym, but it's a much bigger deal,
But the increasing popularity of aesthetic surgeries is just astonishing. They become more and more popular, and more people decide to do it. Like I was getting back from Ishi conference last week, and on one of the airports, I've noticed a man with visible signs of hair transplantation.
Oh, yeah.
And from what I understood, because he was talking on the phone, he was coming back from Turkey, and he was an American, and he just undergo a surgery to to have beautiful hair on his head and not to become bald. So these things are becoming more and more popular. So I wonder how it changes in a few years. And in fact, studies show that people, for instance, women who undergo some aesthetic surgeries like facelifting or stuff like that, actually afterwards are more satisfied with how they appear, how their physical attractiveness is. And they're also judged by objective observers, like photos of people before and after aesthetic surgeries. They're more favorably rated afterwards, though we don't know the longitudinal effects. Because I might also expect that if people undergo one aesthetic surgery, they might, in the long run also be dissatisfied with something else, and it's like a slippery slope to being constantly dissatisfied about something, because there's always something you can improve in your body with the help of a surgeon. But yeah, this is something really interesting, and I would love to study it even more and see how this thing changes in time, and how our social perception of people who underwent aesthetic surgeries changes. So yeah, this is a risk of conducting such large-scale study. And in the next step, after conducting this study, my team and I decided to conduct those semi-structured interviews. And we also discovered nuanced and particular to given culture things that people did. And this is not yet a published study. Again, this is currently under review in Evolution of Human Behavior. Cross my fingers for a positive outcome. But anyway, what we observed is that, for instance, in Cook Island, this is the islands in the Pacific Ocean, close to the line of time change, to the east of Australia. So in Cook Islands, the importance of flowers is really high. And in no other country, people repetitively say that flowers, like in hairs or guirlands or in their clothes, are so important as in Cook Islands. For instance, in Guatemala, people all the time mentioned fashionable clothing. They even said that if you don't look good in terms of your attire, then even though you have millions in your account, people would look down to you because you just don't look neat and your clothing is not perfect. For instance, in Pakistan, people were really focused on golden jewelry, like women. This is part of the interesting intrasexual competition, because if women who was married was not wearing golden jewelry, one participant asked this person, like, who's not wearing golden jewelry, are you even married? Like, aren't your husband provide you with golden jewelry? Wow. Like, come on, who are you? So yeah, but this was really specific to Pakistan. Also, what we mentioned earlier, the birds, like Pakistani men were really focused on the birds, and they wanted to have them well trimmed. This was an important cultural thing for Pakistan. And body shape in Poland, I believe this might be related to westernized canon of beauty and how slim women were and how muscular men are. So, these are some specific things each culture might have. And this just speaks to the variety of cultures across the world. And this is something I'm curious and mostly interested in, because although there are so many commonalities, there are also so many cultural differences, amazing differences. And I love to use the evolutionary framework to try to explain and try to go into grips and go into details on the motivation or the reasons behind those differences.
Well, this was really just an incredible conversation. I found this inspiring as a researcher, but also just fascinating as a civilian. This was really good, and it's a topic that's pretty close to my heart in terms of research. I find it endlessly interesting. So, thanks so much for coming on today, Marta. It was really great. Where can people find you? Do you have any social media or anything you want to promote? Is there anywhere I should send people?
Oh, thank you, Mark. And first of all, really thank you for inviting me. I had lots of fun during this conversation. But before we finish, I would like to once again express my gratitude to all the people without whom we wouldn't have this conversation right now, because, so many people were involved in the study, and if we weren't having those results, then we probably wouldn't be talking right now about them. So I would like to express my gratitude to my mentor, Piotr Sorokowski, who was also my PhD supervisor. And, this is such a wise and incredible scholars from whom I learn a lot. And I would also like to express my gratitude to all of those over 400 scholars who were part of our cross-culture team. And I'm sorry, I won't name all of those people, though I would love to, but then this podcast would probably last a few hours more. But I'm really sincerely grateful to each of those people. And I would also like to thank Polish National Science Center, because this study was a part of the project for which I received a grant to conduct it. So if it wasn't for this grant, I wouldn't also be involved in this project. And I would also like to thank the Foundation for Polish Science, from which I currently am receiving a START scholarship. And if any of the listeners would like to find me or even join our cross-cultural team, because we are always open to inviting new people and conducting further cross-cultural studies, then you can visit my website. You can Google my name, and probably one of the first results will be the website, on which you will easily find instructions on how to leave your email address. But for the record, it's martakowal.com. And you can also find me on Twitter, where I tend to post and publish all the studies that get published. So you're more than welcome to drop by and just send me an email and say hi, because I love to have such incredible conversations like the one I had right now with Mac. And if you want to stay in touch, then definitely leave your email, and I would love to talk with you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. And we've got a collaboration in the works. So I guess the next time I'll talk to you, we'll be talking data analysis.
Lovely. I'm looking forward to.
That's our show. Thank you so much again to Marta. That was genuinely a super fun episode, and I feel like I learned even more listening back to edit it. Marta's website is very easy to find if you know her full name, which you all do. But I have also linked it in the show description if you want to go straight there, if you're in a rush. Thanks again for listening. Thank you to all the donors who support this show. If you enjoy it and want more of it, you can always donate at macandmurphy.org. The donate button is next to the species logo. So thank you to all the donors who support the show. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, remember, be kind to animals.